Our next session, Reconnecting with Nature, led by Haryanto Mehta, is a conversation with ecologist and activist Dr. Vandana Shiva, and will explore our inherent interdependence with our ecosphere. Dr. Shiva is nursing an injured knee today, so we're very, very grateful for you to take your time and effort to join us here in Mumbai. A little bit about Dr. Shiva. In 1982, Dr. Shiva founded the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Ecology in Dehradun, dedicated to addressing the most significant ecological and social issues of our times, in partnership with local and social movements. In 1991, she founded Navdanya, a national movement to protect the diversity and integrity of living resources, especially the native seed, as well as the promotion of organic farming and fair trade. In 2004, she started an international college for sustainable living in Doon Valley in collaboration with Schumacher College in the UK. Time magazine identified Dr. Shiva as an environmental hero. Asia Week called her one of the 5 most powerful communicators of Asia. Forbes magazine has identified Dr. Shiva as one of the top 7 most powerful women on the globe. She has received honorary doctorates from numerous universities across the globe, and among her many awards are the Right Livelihood Award, Earth Day International Award, UN Global 500 Award, Sydney Peace Prize, the Prism of Reason Award, the Midori Prize for Biodiversity, and most recently, the Lifetime Service Award by Sanctuary Wildlife. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shiva.
Dr. Shiva, thank you so very much again for making this trip. Despite the injury, it's really our pleasure.
My pleasure too.
We were talking actually during lunchtime about your very interesting take, very inspiring take on going back to our roots. And we see actually in the Indian tradition that ecology is almost elevated to the level of the divine. And perhaps one of the challenges of our times is a deviation from this worldview, from this connection to nature. What would you say is this misplacement? How have we deviated? And how perhaps is it the root of our ecological crisis?
I'm remembering Gandhi, who said it's a complaint against India that we are steadfast. Storms come and go, and we don't get uprooted. And the problem is we forgot how to stand and be steadfast. Partly because our philosophy of being an ecological civilization, which to me means many things. You know, I did my PhD in the foundations of quantum theory because I was absolutely fed up with a mechanistic worldview of the world as dead matter, of things disconnected and separate, and therefore the license to violate. And when I did my quantum theory, and later also became an ecological activist, starting with Chipko, I realized that our entire philosophy is based on non-separation. Yeah? So my science and my activism kind of mutually reinforced each other. And we were dealing with globalization. You know, I used to organize rallies of 5 lakh farmers, 8 lakh farmers, to say, no, you can't reduce food to a commodity, and you can't reduce the livelihoods of our small farmers to have to compete in a highly unfair market. We managed to stop WTO in Seattle, and then we were told that we know what we are against, we don't know what we are for. And I remember telling a journalist, it's because we know what we are for, that we are against this crass commodification of the world, of the liberty and license to extract and violate. And I think we lost our way because we allowed the religion, first of money making, which is all that globalization is deregulation, both of society, forget your values, and of governments, don't protect. Yeah? I mean, we're dealing with every environmental law we put in place in the 70s being dismantled, and it's counted as progress, you know, and they call it reform. Yeah? Reform was from ethics, that you become a better person. How now reform is how to be a worse person. Just be a greedier person and we'll worship you. And then the tools for money making become another god and another religion. And because the rest, who have no role in all of this, must somehow keep this illusion alive, consumerism becomes a new god. And that lovely teachings we had, in my family from Gandhi, of simplicity as the most elevated way to be. You remember simple living, high thinking? Now it is crude living and base thinking. And Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is what has inspired me as the idea for our times.
Please explain this, because it's a beautiful concept.
So Vasundhara is the earth in her sacredness and her divinity. She is, of course, expressed in diverse species and in diverse cultures. And Kutumbakam means the family. So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means the earth family. And the original teachings of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam say very clearly, anyone who thinks so-and-so is like me and so-and-so is not like me, or so-and-so is an outsider and so-and-so is an insider, is a symptom of a petty mind. Elevated minds realize the whole world is one interconnected family. And so, we never allowed anthropocentric thinking to evolve in India. We were not above the tree, and we were not above the whale, and that anthropocentrism is what has brought the world to a brink, originally by creating scarcity and poverty, then by creating conflicts. We worship the tiger and the elephant, and now there's shootings of tigers and elephants because there's new man-elephant conflicts, they say, which is a strange phrase, because we are animals too. So at one level, it's conflicts within the earth family, and then finally it's collapse. I want to make a map of India that is desertifying. We planted every tree according to the right place. The music we just heard from Kutch, and also, Rajasthan is the most populated desert of the world. Not because they got lots of rain, but because they protected every drop of water. And that love and care for the earth, Mati Bani, that's what it means, the voice of the earth. We wrote a manifesto the other day where we realized the word human in Latin is derived from the word humus, which means soil. We are the earth. We are all Mati Bani. And we've forgotten that, and we'll have to return to it to survive, not just as a civilization, but as cultures, as religions. And we are the only place which said dharma, the right livelihood. We didn't have religions. That's why all these fights over religions are a bit of a make-believe. They're a political theater.
It's interesting that you mention it like this, because one of the things, especially on the Indian subcontinent, we see this rich diversity.
Yes.
Languages and cultures and all sorts of different practices and customs. And yet there is some uniting thread. And this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam concept unites this diversity. And yet you speak about this monocultures of the mind, monocultures in agriculture. Can you explain a little bit about why you see this as a deviation from this this beauty of the diversity into a simplification, or maybe let's say oversimplification of homogeneity?
Because I think simplicity is elegant.
Sure.
I think reduction is a shrinkage. And when life is free, when society is free, when a child is free, you express yourself in unique ways. It's when you're constrained that uniformity creeps in. And so all dictators love uniformity. And I awoke to the monoculture of the mind, first seeing our forests of the Himalaya become monocultures of pine, and the oaks and the rhododendrons.
Can you explain this a little bit more? Because this monocultures concept, it might still be alien to many of us.
Okay, so the world in freedom, both the world of human life and non-human life, is an urge to express diversity. And anywhere where you see diversity, in a forest, on a farm, in the way we dress, in the way we eat, is an expression of freedom. When a system starts to get exploited, either to reduce it to one supply of one commodity, then the oak, which has a personality which grows in all directions and is not linear, is not good enough. You need the pine. You need the eucalyptus. You need linearity. And so natural forests with rich diversity are converted into monocultures. And it's to articulate the call of the Chipko sisters that I first talked about that word. And then when I studied Punjab and the destruction and devastation of Punjab, which led to the 1984 emergence of violence, that's when I realized it's happening in agriculture too. And people used to write before globalization, in India the sari will never go. We've seen it go. Because fast fashion has managed to convince brilliant Indian women that getting clothing out of a slave factory in Bangladesh, cotton that killed our farmers in Vidarbha, that chain of fast fashion is like the chain of uniformity of junk food. You know, around the world, the people are drinking the same junk Coke and the same junk Pepsi, and our kids are living on the junk Lay's chips. That's become the staple diet worldwide. And it is an alarm, 75% diseases are coming from this. But everyone's wearing junk clothing. And the economy of this, from what I've looked at, is 1% stays with the producer. 99% is those who trade and those who put their stamp, the logo, the brand. And so a monoculture of the mind is a system that distills exploitation of the earth, exploitation of producers, and leaves you in the current Macaulay syndrome. I don't know how many of you know of Macaulay.
Maybe not.
You know, Macaulay was the one who said, India's too rich. She can never be colonized. But we can colonize her by making them believe that everything they have is inferior and all the junk we bring is superior. And that's how we'll get them to buy our clothing. And now, without a Macaulay saying it, we're doing it all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Related to this, actually, in your books and in your talks, you caution against this incessant drive to make money and the measure of GDP as a sort of major contributor to the ecological destruction. In what way? what has GDP measurement and the drive for money or profit making got to do with ecological destruction?
Well, you know, I've seen it come in 3 waves. First was when my sisters of Chipko in the 70s were getting arrested for protecting the forest and doing the hug. Chipko means to hug, and they defended the forests of the Himalaya by hugging the trees. And they were arrested for hugging trees. Because the crime was you are interfering in the collection of revenues and growth. Wasn't a big word those days, but it meant the same thing. Because cutting a tree generated money, saving a tree generated life, but not money. It was a clear thing between life and money. And then with the whole issue of globalization, it nearly failed because we never accepted it. And I remember a fictitious figure was cooked up, $200 billion of additional trade. Well, additional trade doesn't mean better lives. You know, we are importing ghatiya dal, yellow pea dal, 7% protein, and our farmers growing tur and chana are being shot to death for protesting, for selling their good dal, which has 35% protein. Of course there's more trade. You cut a tree, you have growth. You sell junk, you have growth. You poison people, the same companies that contribute to growth by selling Roundup and pesticides. One growth, and then you get cancer, the same company.
Making medicines.
Make the medicines for cancer, more growth. More cancer, more growth. More sickness, more growth. And my brother Samdu is here from Bhutan, where the idea of gross national happiness evolved, and they were so clear that GDP doesn't measure anything real. Now, when did it start? It started during the war. measuring economies through gross domestic product and gross national product began in the war when they needed to mobilize society's wealth to finance warfare. More drones, more armaments, more naval ships, and therefore society's wealth had to be extracted, and the measure created was GDP. And it's based on something called a production boundary. And the production boundary, because I went into this to understand, how do they calculate it this way? In the war, they said, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. And our wonderful singers from Kutch, if they're producing their own music and participating in it, they're not part of the big music economy. So the production boundary says, if you produce what you consume, if you're self-reliant, if you are in a circular economy, you are not contributing to production. You've got to sell what you produce, and you've got to buy what you need, and that is how GDP grows. But a system of that kind is based on extraction from nature, and extraction from people, and extraction from the society, and therefore, nature gets poorer, that's the ecological crisis. People get poorer, that's the hunger crisis, that's the poverty crisis. And when things get too bad, you just change the statistics. Now you don't measure. Earlier, poverty used to be measured on the basis of what did you eat, you know? Poverty was measured on what you eat. It's measured now on what you consume. And the more you spend on food, the richer you're getting. You might be eating half, but you spend double the amount. If my clean river went and I have to drink water from this, I'm spending more money to quench my thirst, I'm richer. A dead river, which is poverty, doesn't count. So it's an interlocked system. I see it more and more as a system of theft from nature in society and an illusion in which we are living in a prison.
This actually naturally sort of reminds me of Gandhi's very famous, I think, quote, yes? That the world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed.
Yes.
And actually, you've spoken about this whole industrial revolution as a sort of almost inspired by war, almost inspired by, as a destructive means. Wasn't quite able to understand how is this industrial agriculture, which was invented or developed in order to feed the growing population of the planet, how is it actually a war technology? In what manner?
Well, coming back to Gandhi's, brilliant. I don't think there is a lesson in ecology distilled more than that phrase, that the earth has enough for everyone's needs. And if we only really learn how much potential the earth is, I save seeds. One seed can give you 1 million seeds in one generation. In the next generation, 1 million into 1 million. You never have scarcity. Whereas, if I make a terminator seed and I make a hybrid seed, which you can't save, I've got growth, but I don't have more seed. Gandhi distilled this from the ancient Isha Upanishad, which says that the universe is the creation of the supreme power, meant for the benefit of all creation. Each individual life form must therefore learn to enjoy its benefits by forming a part of the system in close relationship with other species. Let not any one species encroach on others' rights. Now, when you start encroaching on other rights, if you're thinking mechanically, there's less space for them, but more for you. But when you realize ecologically in non-separation, when you've killed the butterflies and the pollinators, you have 1/3 food less because they pollinate for you. That's 1/3 the food. When you kill the soil organisms with industrial farming, your soils become desertified, your decline of yield starts, which is happening to Punjab. The soils are desertified, their production is going down. So my critique of the industrial agriculture really is that it's not an agriculture system. Agriculture means care of the land.
But we have to feed our growing population.
Exactly, by taking care of the land. Industrial agriculture was an invention after the wars to sell leftover chemicals. Pesticides were the chemicals used in the concentration camps to kill people. All pesticides are derivatives of xylon B, which was used to gas people in the gas chambers. Even chemical fertilizers, which look very harmless, were really first made through the technology of fixing atmospheric nitrogen by burning fossil fuels at high temperature for making ammunitions and explosives for the war. After the war, they were sold as nitrogen fertilizers, and it's not an accident that all over the world, fertilizer bombs are being used in terrorist attacks. In Afghanistan, most of the terrorist attacks are fertilizer bombs. So these were imagination of war. I mean, for humanity to imagine, well, this person is something else, not like me, and therefore I have a right to exterminate them. I think that thought of extermination, either of other humans or other species, is the highest human rights crime, and it is recognized as a crime, which is why we have a human rights declaration. It frames all our laws.
So then what is the alternative that Navdanya and in your work you have developed and come across?
Well, I've learned from nature, for one. You know, I'm not trained in agriculture. I've learned from our farmers. We farmed for 10,000 years. And we have been feeding 1.3 billion people. And we've been feeding them well with a lot of diversity. Our amazing thali is the richest biodiversity you can ever eat. I think we eat about 50 crops in every meal. Minimum. You know, in the US, they eat one big steak from a factory farm. So what we do, first I realized in my studies on the violence of the Green Revolution and all my other work, I realized it all began with seed. To put chemicals into farming, they had to change the seed and turn it into the dwarf varieties. Later, they wanted to patent the seed, genetically modify the seed. That's when I said, I'll save the seed. Now, the seed, when it's organically bred, is good for organic farming and produces a lot. When you allow nature to recycle what she produces and give something back to her in the form of organic farming is nothing but an act of gratitude to the earth. It's not a technique, it's not a product, it's not a production system. It's an obligation for being members of the earth family.
It almost sounds like Gandhi's Satyagraha.
Well, you know, my life has been guided by Gandhi's Satyagraha because I woke up to environmental destruction with the disappearance of a forest in the Himalaya. I grew up in these forests, and I joined CHIPCO. CHIPCO was a forest satyagraha. There was a forest satyagraha in 1930 at the time of the salt satyagraha. Last year, we celebrated 100 years of Gandhi's Champaran satyagraha, where indigo was being cultivated under forced conditions in Champaran. And one bag of indigo used to be sold for a bag of gold, which is why they wanted to control indigo. So we did a yatra, because for 30 years and more, 45 years now, forest satyagraha, bhoo satyagraha, the land grab, everywhere people are rising on land grab because this is our mother.
What is Satyagraha?
Well, Satyagraha is knowing there are higher laws in this universe. The Isha Upanishad is one. That this world and creation is meant for all beings, today and forever in the future. That this planet has her laws. She's called Gaia, not for nothing. When they realized, James Lovelock realized she's self-organized and alive, he said she's Gaia. We have laws of human rights, of respecting all humanity. Just knowing those laws and understanding when they are violated and then distilling the courage, both from the understanding of the whole and not accepting the violation, is a non-cooperation with brutal laws, laws of injustice, laws of violence. That's Satyagraha, the power of truth, the force of truth.
To take this one step further, you spoke about the inherent sort of nature's laws as above any other legal or administrative system that could be. If the individual, like any common person in the audience today, wanted to take an ecological step, in our everyday lives, living in Mumbai, how can we really live it? Because we cannot, because of I mean, there's always a choice, but let's say, for the practicality of it, we cannot move to the Himalayas. We cannot maybe, rent a cottage in Navdanya as much as I would like it. But how do I do it in Mumbai? How do I do it here in our everyday lives?
You eat in Mumbai?
Yes.
And I think that's where the problem begins, where we eclipse nature from our being because we were told we are separate from nature, we are outside her, we are her masters, we are her exploiters, we are her owners. We forget the farmer who produced the food. And of course, because of the way chemical farming has been celebrated, we forget the earthworm and the bee and the butterfly, and it doesn't matter if they are getting annihilated. We are on the verge. Every scientific study of the recent months has said that whether it's the UN Climate Change Treaty or it's the Biodiversity Treaty, they're warning saying if we don't shift in the next 10 years, there is an imminent collapse of our life-supporting systems on this planet. The climate systems, the biodiversity systems, the land systems, the water systems. So you all eat every day. The beauty of my learnings from the seed and the soil and the food has been that we don't just have to protect biodiversity out there. We have to protect biodiversity in, because we are one life. We are not made from different elements. It's the same Panchamahabhuta. And outside, it shows up as a forest, as a farm, as a soil food web, as insect webs. Inside us is 100 trillion companions. 100 trillion. In what is now being recognized as the gut microbiome. We are only 10% human. We are 90% microbial. They are the ones who take the chana we eat and turn it into our brilliant system. They are making our bones and our blood. They're making our neurotransmitters. There's new findings that this is only one little brain. There's a brain here called the second brain, which is the gut. This work is being done by trillions of organisms.
Sure.
And when they are killed because of the chemicals in our food, they are not able to produce the enzymes that produce the neurotransmitters. So you now have an epidemic of Alzheimer's, of dementia, of autism. All neurological problems, scientists are realizing, come from the food we eat. But the same system that's killing you, and 75% of the chronic diseases begin with food, the same problems are killing our farmers, 300,000 farmer suicides. They're killing the planet. And so every time you eat is a time you can make a difference. Of course, you make a difference to yourself, but you make a difference to others. Then you'll say, but how do I get it, right? Well, you're very lucky because Navdanya years ago started a small place in Andheri. There's a Navdanya Mumbai in Andheri. And I know my colleagues at navdanyamumbai@gmail.com also do home deliveries, but that's a very small part of it because one little outlet is not going to address the problems. In this journey, pilgrimage, we took a pledge that by the year 2047, Jaivik Bharat 2047, by the time it's 100 years of our independence, we want to work together for an India that's free of hunger. We are 100th on the hunger list. Every second child is malnourished. Every fourth Indian is hungry. We're going to be an India that's free of farmer suicides. No farmer should be committing suicide. Annadata shouldn't be coming. We are going to get rid of the chronic diseases. And I would love to invite novaacropole to be a partner of Navdanya to do two things very concretely. First, if you create a food, we've got to get out of the idea that food is a commodity you buy blindly. Food is not a commodity. Food is your very nourishment. It's the divine. Annam Brahman, we say in this civilization. Annam Brahman.
Meaning?
Food is the creator. Brahman is God. Annam is food. Food as sacred. Every religion has sacred bread. Every religion has sacred bread. Now, so to recover that and to re-find our community, our commonness, I'm working towards food as a commons and building food communities where farmers of Vidarbha are not separate from you. And you don't feel isolated and incapable of action. And the farmer of Vidarbha on the verge of committing suicide doesn't feel there's no way out. Let's work on a common plan for a 5-year transition so that Vidarbha, instead of growing BT cotton, which is pushing farmer suicides, is growing good, nourishing food for a food community of solidarity you create here.
Just to complete the loop, there are a few places that you have spoken about the seed as the new spinning wheel.
Yes.
This is an interesting concept because it demonstrates the ability to revitalize Gandhi, to adapt a spirit to changing times, changing circumstances. Can you share with us, just as a closing remark, something about that?
I wasn't revitalizing Gandhi. That's too arrogant a situation. No, I was desperate. I was at this meeting where the old chemical industry that had gassed the Jews and then had killed people was now saying we're not making enough money. And we have to own the seed. And to own the seed, we'll use genetic engineering to pretend we are making something new. Then we'll have patents. And with the patents, we'll take royalties. And the royalties on seed will be our future profits. And I was at the small meeting at the UN. I said, but you don't invent the seed. And they said, no, by the time we are finished, we'll be 5 companies. There are 3. Monsanto, Bayer have become 1, DuPont Dow have become 1, and Syngenta Chem China have become 1. And they said, we'll be 3. And no farmer will be allowed to save seed because we will make sure patents make it illegal for them to have their seed. I said, by the time I'm finished, every farmer will have a right to save seed. And your lie that you are creators of life on earth will defeat. We changed the laws of this country. We've done a book called Origin. And till last week, I was in Nariman's court because Monsanto is trying to knock out the Article 3J, which says plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions in Indian law. Therefore, they can't be patented. We distilled Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam into our law. So when I was thinking of how do you deal with this idea of empire over life, I thought of Gandhi dealing with the cotton empire. He pulled out the spinning wheel, and I did a little matrix in my head and said if for the cotton empire it was cotton and the spinning wheel, for this empire of life, it's the seed. And so it's the spinning wheel that inspired me to start Navdanya and the seed-saving movement, and the Satyagraha, which gave the courage and the creativity to find new ways to say, we will not obey bad laws that violate our conscience, that violate our ethics. And I want to mention, this year's climate treaty, you know what's been the big issue? Has been a Satyagraha. She didn't use the word, she's Swedish. She calls it a school strike. She said, I will not go to school till you adults can start behaving with maturity about the planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, in pursuit of truth, Dr. Vandana Shiva.